All right, welcome back to the beautiful Pacific Northwest, the land of plaid and coffee and PacWest Bigfoot. This is David. Let's get a sip of coffee real quick together, if you don't mind. And I want to say thank you guys so very much for all of your emails and those of you who listen to these based on true stories of Bigfoot encounters that I turn into campfire-like stories for folks. Listening in with your kids and everything in the family is just, when I get those emails, it's just really awesome. I really do enjoy that. Thank you so very much for just dropping me a line about that. Real quick, towards the end of next week, the PacWest Bigfoot clan will be open. The membership fee for it is really just going to go to cover the cost of my time here to take these unique, awesome Bigfoot encounter stories and turn them into these campfire-like stories for you. Not to mention all the interviews of not just from researchers out here in the community, but also from those who have had Bigfoot encounters and experiences around North America. Not to mention double your chance to win something from PacWest Bigfoot, and I'm going to be doubling up. You're going to get an encounter story every single week, and some weeks two. So that's what's going to happen there. Not to mention I'm going to jump on there on some live stream and be sharing that with you, sharing thoughts and taking your questions and taking your comments and your ideas and chatting about them as far as Bigfoot is concerned. So I just want to say thank you so very much for that. And thank you for putting up with my 5-year-old in the background. He is with me today. So there you go. But this Friday the 13th, I figured I would just give you guys an extra little story here. Of course, your regular PacWest Bigfoot encounter story will be out next week on the YouTube channel. But also, don't forget, in the PacWest Bigfoot clan, you're going to start getting like I said, a PacWest Bigfoot story every single week, period. Okay? So let's get on with this special one for Friday the 13th, just for you. Yeah, just for you. Out here on this Friday the 13th. Charity meets Bigfoot. Dear PacWest Bigfoot, David, I have a story. I emailed you 2 weeks ago and told you that I'd write it down. Well, here it is. And Charity, sorry it's taken me so long to get this out to you real quick, to put this together and get it up. I get a lot of encounter stories, so please forgive me. Anyways, I am 47 years old and I have never felt confident enough to share this with anyone outside of my family until I heard other people on your channel and other Bigfoot channels speak so frankly. Like many other people, I thought I would be ridiculed or called crazy. Glad for an anonymous place to get this written down. Charity. When I was 10 years old, back in the spring of 1981, and I had an experience with Bigfoot near my home. We got spring break in early March. It was short, maybe one school week, which made me happy as a fourth grader way back then. However, our spring breaks were basically still winter, unless we were extremely lucky and we had a warm spell, and this spring break we did. The weather was unusually warm for March and had been since mid-February. We could even see large patches of earth and brown grass, and our days were approaching 60 degrees and sometimes 65. Even in school, and everyone in school and my neighborhood were so excited with this strange early spring thaw, and boy, were we excited about it. It would snow again that year, and in fact, we had a bunch of snow, but for these few weeks, we were all convinced it was winter's end. Haha. Sunny, beautiful blue skies, trees prematurely budding, the icy creeks melting. Ha, so wonderful. Well, that is until the second or third day of my spring break when things at my house got too chaotic. I had 3 brothers and a sister, and I decided to take off on my own up West Mountain. This wasn't the first time I had done this. There was a path behind my friend's house that led up the mountain. That path eventually ended up in a U-turn path, a U-turn path, kind of a path abruptly ending and widening so ATVs and dirt bikes could turn around. And that's where the adventurous ATV riders or hikers usually headed back. Plus, it began to get very rocky and a very forested path here. So nobody had much interest in proceeding any further. However, as I mentioned earlier, I was a bored kid with a lot of time on my hand and a beautiful day to spend wandering. And boy, did I. I set off in early morning hours, as I recall, around 9:30. I brought nothing, only wearing just light clothing, jeans, a long sleeve t-shirt, and a pair of Keds. I'm not sure if I was even wearing socks. I had a belly full of Cheerios, and apparently at that time, in my 10-year-old mind, I felt that I was good to go. As I set off, I wasn't thinking much of anything, just the pure bliss of perceived independence and the excitement which comes when you are 10 years old and leaving a noisy house and whiny siblings behind for freedom. Yes, I lived for days such as this. As I set off, wandering far past the end of the man-made path, the brush was thick. Not leafy yet. It was a mass of brown and soggy undergrowth that the recently melted snow had uncovered. I could smell it in all its fresh, rotten wonderfulness with each step I took. Minutes became hours. It was thrilling. Undeterred, I marched on, taking a mental note of how my white Keds were becoming grayish black. Boy, would my mom be mad, I thought. But that was a worry I quickly dismissed later. I walked and walked, up and further up. I remember looking at the sky, and the sun was dead center, and even back then I knew that it must be lunchtime. Besides, my Cheerios were long gone, and my tummy was beginning a protest. I looked behind me, and there was literally no clues as to the distance I had traveled. All I knew was that the ground was still going up. I was getting very thirsty. At some point I stopped to rest near a birch tree. As I sat down next to this beautiful scraggly tree, I peeled a piece of bark away from its trunk and started scratching at the paper-like bark with my fingernail. And I scribbled in, "I am lost." It came out perfectly, or as perfectly as a fourth grader is capable of writing. I remember thinking that maybe Indians used to write on this bark, just as I had. I think I must have been worried, or at least starting to become worried at that point. Then I heard a noise. It was a good noise, a hopeful sound. It was the sound of moving water. However, I couldn't tell from which direction it was coming. All the forest sounds were sort of blending together. I was confused. I heard a crow belt out a series of stark, lonely caws in the distance. I even saw a doe bounding through the trees up ahead as if it was frightened, probably from the footsteps which had snapped my footsteps which had snapped many small broken branches along the way. I did, however, have a vague sense that I was in danger because I was lost. But being a kid, my spirits were still high. I'd get out of this, I was sure. That sort of optimism is something only fools and very young children possess, and I was soon to learn the error of my ways. I left my tree bark note at the base of the tree I had been sitting at, knowing that it was highly unlikely anyone would ever find it. But it seemed like a dramatic thing to do. And I was starting to feel very dramatic. So, anyways, that's what I did. And I went on my way to see if I could find the delicious-sounding creek or river. Wow! I was so thirsty, I remember thinking of the purple grape Kool-Aid in our refrigerator at home. That made me feel sad and alone. I managed to find a few hunks of remaining snow to eat, but they were scarce. Maybe this was a bad idea after all. I even started to miss my brother, who I never thought I'd miss because I thought I hated him. My great adventure was quickly becoming an absolute nightmare. However, the nightmare had only just begun. I don't know how far I had traveled, but as I walked, I was sure the sound of water rushing was getting louder and louder. I came up to some very thick brush covering and high rock face. I got through the brush and was able to climb up the rock. When I got up there, I felt a coolness in the shaded area that I found refreshing, and now I heard water very loudly. I realized that there was about a 30-foot deep ravine just steps away, and in it a fast-moving creek. I couldn't wait to get down there, as I was insanely thirsty. I practically ran down the side of the ravine, my sneakers slipping and sliding over mossy rock. I, being a bit of a drama queen, Mom always said I was a very theatrical girl, lay on my elbows at the muddy creekside and put my face in the rushing icy water. I could see small brown and white smooth stones at the bottom. I drank that nearly frozen water until the brain freeze was so intense that my head ached. Just as I was about to stop drinking, I saw something red rush by in the water. There was also foam from the rushing water, but strangely it was pink. I thought I was just imagining it because I still had that feeling of 1,000 pins stabbing me in the head from drinking the cold water, the coldest water actually on the planet. I looked again and nope, I wasn't imagining anything. Because there was more red in the water. It looked like blood. Dang, it is blood, I yelled. I don't know if I actually yelled it or just yelled it in my head. I looked up the creek from where I was, and what I saw next has haunted me for 37 years. Standing in the middle of the creek on 2 legs was a female Bigfoot. She was huge. Her hair was burnt orange in color. I guess amber would be the closest description. It was massive, at least 10 feet tall. She couldn't have been more than maybe 20, 30 feet away from me, and I saw every detail. I knew it was a female because she had breasts on her brownish, orangish, hairy chest. Her eyes were a hazel color, and she stared right into mine. Her face was that of a human and that of an ape. Her expression was hard to describe. Curious, startled, mad? I couldn't tell. I felt a warm sensation on the seat of my pants. Later, I realized I had literally peed my britches. In my disbelief, my eyes traveled to her huge left arm, and I noticed that she was grasping a chewed-up, bloody leg of a deer. Probably the same deer I saw earlier, thinking back. I could see the hoof dangling off of its broken tendons. She had blood on her dark gray face, adding to my sheer horror. Her blackish lips curled slightly, revealing a hint of yellow teeth which looked sharp. She seemed to be sizing me up, and I just stood there, frozen in my tracks. I believed that I was going to die, and I started crying, loud. "Please don't hurt me, please!" She continued staring for a few more seconds, and walked to the other side of the creek, still carrying her bloody snack. She looked over her massive shoulder and made a series of low, grunting noises. She climbed up the other side of the ravine in what seemed like 3 or 4 paces. I couldn't believe how big she was. Thinking back, she must have weighed at least 600 pounds. As I watched her disappear in the forest, my fears started to subside. Well, slightly. It was clear that she had no interest in harming me, at least right then. Plus, I thought she wasn't hungry. I didn't know if Bigfoots ate humans, but I didn't want to find out. I think at that point I went into survival mode. Every instinct I possessed wanted to get off the mountain. I remember someone telling me that if you get lost in the woods and find a creek, follow it down the mountain and you will more than likely get back to civilization. So that's what I did. I walked as fast as my feet would carry me along that ravine. The hike took hours, and I was hungry, dirty, and scared, but no longer thirsty. I heard crashing steps on the opposite side of the ravine the whole time, on and off. I had a feeling that she was following me. I didn't care as long as she didn't make another appearance, because I was sure I'd die if I had to see her again. I also wondered if there were others. God, Lord, please help me get home, I kept whispering into the air. Well, my trip ended up being 9 hours, the worst 9 hours of my entire life. Eventually, the creek led me to a break in the woods, a guardrail, and a God-blessed road. I was so happy to see that road. A road meant cars, and cars meant people. People would carry me home. And that was exactly what happened. An elderly man in an old station wagon drove up, spotted me, and pulled over. He reached over and rolled his passenger window down and yelled, "Aren't you one of the girls? Stewart girls? What the devil are you doing out here anyway? I know for a fact your folks don't want you wandering on this road yourself." Oh, great. It was a friend of my grandfather's. I knew I was in trouble, but nothing compared to the trouble I was in just a few hours earlier. I decided that I would not tell anybody because I believed they would say I was crazy or making up stories. I got grounded for a week, but I never went up on that mountain by myself again. For some, Bigfoot is just a myth or a legend. To me, Bigfoot is a reality. I never wish to have another encounter again. Thank you. Charity. And if you will, please preserve my anonymity if you read on your channel. Thanks again.